Once upon a time, nestled in a lush green meadow, lived a small turtle named Benny. This meadow was a beautiful place, with flowers of every color imaginable and a gentle sun that always seemed to shine. Through the middle of this meadow flowed a wide, sparkling river. To most animals, the river was a source of joy and refreshment, but for Benny, it was a source of great fear. Benny was afraid of the deep water. He would watch other animals splash and play, their laughter echoing across the banks, but he would always stay safely on the dry land, his little heart pounding in his shell whenever he got too close to the edge. Benny had many friends in the meadow. There was Fiona the frog, who could leap from one lily pad to another in the blink of an eye. There was Ricky the rabbit, who could dash through the tall grass like a furry bolt of lightning. And there was Sammy the squirrel, who could scamper up the tallest trees with ease. They all loved Benny for his kind heart and his gentle nature, but they never quite understood his fear of the river. "Come on in, Benny," Fiona would often call out. "The water's wonderful." Benny would just shake his head and retreat a little further into his shell, wishing he could be as brave as his friends. Sammy was a bit of a daredevil. He loved balancing on a long, thin branch that hung right over the water. Benny always felt a knot of worry in his stomach when Sammy did this. "Be careful," Benny called out, his voice small and timid. Sammy just laughed, his bushy tail twitching with excitement. "Don't worry, Benny, I'm a professional," he chirped, doing a little hop on the branch. But on that day, the branch was a little more slippery than usual. Sammy's little hop turned into a big wobble, his paws scrabbling for a grip. With a surprised squeak, Sammy lost his balance and tumbled head over heels, landing in the river with a loud splash. Panic seized Benny's heart. He saw Sammy struggling in the water, his fur soaked and heavy, his small body being pulled by the gentle but persistent current. Squirrels are not natural swimmers, and Sammy was clearly in trouble. "Help, Benny, help me," Sammy cried out, his voice filled with fear. All the other animals were on the far side of the meadow and couldn't hear his calls. It was just Benny. Benny, the small turtle who was terrified of the very water his friend was drowning in. For a moment, Benny was frozen. His fear was like a cold, heavy blanket telling him to stay put, to stay safe on the land where he belonged. He could feel his legs trembling and his head starting to pull back into the safety of his shell. He looked at the river, at the swirling currents that had always seemed so menacing. Then he looked at Sammy, at his friend's desperate, pleading eyes. He saw the fear in Sammy's face, a fear much greater than his own. In that instant, something inside Benny shifted. The image of his friend in danger was stronger than his own fear of the water. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't let his friend down. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Benny took one slow step towards the river. Then another. His heart was hammering against the inside of his shell, a frantic drumbeat of terror. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but he kept his eyes fixed on Sammy. He reached the water's edge, the cool liquid lapping at his feet. He had never felt it before. It was cold, but it wasn't the monster he had imagined. He closed his eyes for a second, took another breath, and pushed himself into the water. The shock of the cold was immediate, but so was the instinct to move. Benny started to paddle, his short, sturdy legs pushing against the water. It was slow and clumsy at first. The current tried to push him downstream, away from Sammy, but Benny was determined. He paddled harder, his focus entirely on his friend. The world seemed to shrink until there was only him, Sammy, and the water in between. He wasn't thinking about how deep the river was or what might be lurking beneath the surface. He was only thinking, I have to get to Sammy. Slowly but surely, he made his way across the river. It felt like an eternity. Each paddle was a battle against his fear. But with each paddle, he also felt a new sensation. Strength. He was doing it. He was actually swimming. He was facing his greatest fear, and he was winning. Finally, he reached Sammy, who was clinging weakly to a floating piece of wood. Benny, you came. Sammy sputtered, relief flooding his face. Hold on to my shell, Sammy, Benny said, his voice surprisingly steady. Sammy grabbed onto the back of Benny's shell, and Benny started the long paddle back to the shore. It was even harder towing Sammy, but Benny didn't give up. He used all the strength he had, his little legs working like pistons. He could feel Sammy's weight, but he also felt the weight of responsibility, and it made him stronger. At long last, his feet touched the muddy bottom of the riverbank. He pushed and pulled until both he and Sammy were safely on dry land. Sammy collapsed in a wet heap, coughing and shivering. But he was safe. He looked up at Benny, his eyes full of gratitude. You saved me, Benny, he whispered. You were so brave. Benny looked back at the river. It was still wide and sparkling, but it didn't look so terrifying anymore. He was still a little scared of it, yes, but he had crossed it. He had faced his fear to save his friend. He looked down at his own reflection in a puddle and saw not a small, scared turtle, but a hero. Benny finally understood something very important that day. He realized that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Being brave means being scared, but doing the right thing anyway. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. From that day on, Benny was still a quiet and gentle turtle, but he was no longer defined by his fear. He was Benny the brave turtle, the hero of the meadow, who taught everyone that the truest courage comes from the heart. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed Benny's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. See you next time.